Hey, everybody, and welcome to True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. This is Katie Weaver, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Kristi Brower. Hello.
Hello, nice to be here on the air with you tonight.
Yeah, nice to
Today,
be here.
whenever you all hear this.
Yeah, it's not like it's live, but
Yeah,
you did a live this week, though, a great one.
I did. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. So much happening in the crime world with
Yeah,
old
there is.
cases, like lots of updates.
Lots of stuff. It's pretty cool.
You know what we should say really quick
What?
is that Brian Drips lost his hearing. He does not get released from jail due to the coronavirus.
Yeah.
I talked about that in the live on Wednesday that he is accused of murdering Angie Dodge. It was a murder
Yeah.
here in Idaho Falls where I live.
Yep.
And he has confessed, and there's DNA and there's all this stuff. And he's been in jail awaiting trial, and he's got a lot of health problems. And so he was trying to get released
Yeah.
to like house arrest until his trial.
Mm-hmm.
And the judge said, yeah, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, because that jail is like teeming with COVID.
it
But
is. Yeah, it's full of COVID. But so
yeah.
are all our jails. I
Right.
mean, everything,
Yeah.
all the jails around us are. They had said we can isolate him. We can put him, basically in solitary. And they're like, oh no, we don't want that. He needs to be released, and they're like,
Right. Yeah. Of course he does. Yeah.
this murder happened in the 80s and they they
Yeah.
convicted the wrong man. He did 20 years in jail. They finally have the real guy. I
Yeah.
don't
We're
think they
not letting
want
you out
to.
of our sight.
Yeah, I suspected they were going to say no to that, and they definitely did. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I saw that. That's good. Good.
yeah.
Stay put, Brian Drip. For Christ's
Right?
sake. Yep.
That Brian Drips, he's a real drip.
God. That's the weirdest. Anyway, we won't ever probably do that case since, it's solved.
It's
Hooray.
solved. Yay. So
Yep.
glad it's solved.
Yeah.
It's a big deal for this community.
Yeah. Well, today we are going to do a cold read case, and I think this will be a true cold read. I doubt you have ever heard of this case.
Okay.
Tell me if you have, but I doubt.
I will let you know if I have.
Yeah, it was suggested by a couple of different listeners, so we wanted to honor that. And you guys are awesome. You suggest cases all the time. I know we let you down and we don't get to them. We're trying. Man, we've had a lot thrown our way, so we're trying. I promise. And we still have some things we want to do this fall. We're still planning a little cemetery tour and some things like that a little later in the fall. So we have some really fun stuff coming up here on this channel. But anyway, so tonight or today, we're going to talk about the murders of Harry and Jeannette Crewe. Harry and Jeannette Crewe. This is a really famous old case from New Zealand.
I have not heard of this case. Just
from New
full
Zealand.
Disclosure, I have no idea.
Okay. So I did just send you a few pictures so that you'd have a little something to go on. So here's a couple of disclaimers for our Kiwis out there. You're going to die laughing when you hear the way I pronounce some of your words. I'm sorry. But even just looking at the the spellings, I know I'm going to do a bad job. So I'm sorry about that, but it's probably going to happen. The other thing I want to say is just that this is a really big case. There was a ton of it, a ton of things happened in this case. We're going to do an overview. If you're interested in learning more about this case, by all means do. I mean, there's been books written on it. There has been documentaries. There's been a ton of stuff out there. But in one episode of one podcast, there's only so much we can do.
Right.
And so please.
You nail us hard on the really small details. We're not going to be able to cover them. That's not actually the point of what we're doing.
No, though I do hope that
we get the overview.
Some, cases that you go ahead and dive deep into. But honestly, if we dove as deeply into every single case, we wouldn't be able to do this, or at least put out an episode or two a week.
I mean, it's like the Daybell case. What have we done? 13, 14, 15 episodes now on this case? I mean, you can't do it all in one 1 hour episode by any means.
So I know one of you will be really itching to leave a nasty comment that we just didn't cover the whole thing. And I get it. I'm sorry. It's just the best we can do. So with all of that out of the way, let's actually talk about the case.
Well,
let's not talk about our haters. They don't deserve it.
Whatever.
Bye-bye. All right. So this happened on the 22nd of June, 1970.
Okay.
So these people were farmers. They lived in a place called Pukikawa. I know, probably wrong.
Spell it for me.
I Puke
Okay.
Kawa.
Looks like Pukikawa to me. So
Yeah,
is
me
this New
too.
Zealand? Is that what you said, New Zealand?
Yeah, in New Zealand, in the
Oh,
Waikato region of New Zealand.
okay.
So this is what happened. Uh, these people basically just disappeared. They again, they had a little tiny farm. They lived on a farm, and they had been around earlier in the day, and people had seen them and seen them driving through. I mean, think very, very small farming community,
Okay.
right? Where everybody knows each other, right? Okay. So that's kind of how it starts, is that the person that delivers their bread and milk has delivered bread and milk twice into their delivery box and then their newspaper, and they haven't picked it up, which is just weird and very
Right.
unlike them. Very
Well, the
unlike
milk's
them.
going to be no good. So why would you do that?
And other people were trying to reach them for various farm things. Harvey had some sheep that were supposed to be going to sale, and just a few things like that that were supposed to be happening. And they weren't answering the door. They weren't answering the phone. It was just very unlike them. So then on the third day of the milk and the stuff not being picked up out of the drop box, the delivery man and someone else, another farmer, felt like they needed to check in on them. And so they went and talked to her dad. So her dad had a farm right next door, as the
Okay.
crow flies, and so they went over and visited with him and let him know that, it seems like maybe there's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he hadn't talked to them either, but apparently there had been some stress in the family. So apparently Jeanette's mother had died earlier that year, and they had just settled her will and estate the day before, and Jeannette was receiving a portion of her parents' farm. And there seemed like there maybe had been a bit of consternation there. We don't really know that for sure, but anyway, they hadn't spoken. So his name was Len Demler.
So when you say that the will had been settled, was that something that she attended?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So she was there, and then it was right after that she went missing.
And the next day,
Okay.
no one is, they're not getting their supplies. They're not showing their faces. Anyway, so Lem goes over to the house and he walks in the house, or Len Demler. He goes over to the house and he opens the door, and there is the remains of their dinner on the table. And there is a baby crying. And he goes in and discovers that their 18-month-old baby girl is sitting in her crib and is in not good shape. And so he takes her to a friend. He loads her up and takes her to a family friend and drops her off to be taken care of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And her name was Rochelle, baby Rochelle. And so Rochelle is taken to a friend's house for care. And then they start looking around. There's signs of struggle in the house. There's blood in the house, but absolutely no sign of mom and dad.
Okay.
And so the Mrs. Willis, the family friend, is now taking care of the baby and trying to, get her okay. So a couple of things from the medical report from the baby, because they did finally seek medical care for her about 24 hours after they found her. But she had lost a little weight from the last time she'd been to the doctor. She had sunken in eyes, was quite dehydrated, had a horrific diaper rash. Can you imagine?
Right.
And the doctors did feel like she had been withheld food and water for at least 48 to 72 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. And so she rebounded really quickly, though, actually, and did well. But but that's whoever offed these people left a baby in the crib to die.
Man.
Which, and some say they spared the baby, which, I mean, in essence, I guess they did, but
right, but they didn't. You wouldn't necessarily know if that
yeah,
child would be found in time, and depending on if the child had had any health issues that could have,
yeah,
she was obviously a pretty healthy little kid to have survived that.
yeah,
But if she,
mhm,
had an underlying condition or something, I mean, they
yeah,
couldn't have known.
yeah. So there's an all-out manhunt for them,
Mhm.
because of course their car was at home, everything was at home except for them. So they search and they search and they search. They do a complete, overtaking of the house. They take samples. They are searching everywhere for shell casings or
Mhm.
for like a blunt instrument because there's quite a bit of blood in the house. So initially, the medical examiner is saying, look for a blunt instrument that could have, created a head wound, that could have maybe created this amount of blood. Then they find shell casings, so they decide no, they were shot. So eventually, after a couple of months, Jeannette's body shows up in a nearby river.
Okay.
So, and she was killed by a 22 uh, gunshot to the head. She's wrapped in like a duvet, and that is all wrapped up in copper wire, like farming wire, you know.
Mhm. Okay.
And so, of course, they are taking a look at that. Now they know exactly, what killed her, what gun was in her, or what bullets were in her skull,
Mhm.
sadly. And so now they initially are really kind of looking at her dad because
Right.
he's a weird guy and other people have had some kind of weird experiences with him. And they just, everyone's a little unsure. I mean, it really rocked. You have to consider it's a tiny little farming community
Did
where
she have siblings, or was it just her?
she has a sibling who lives in California, and she got on a plane and actually came home and was home for a little while. Her name is Heather, and she did come home
Okay.
for a little while and help to put on a funeral and things like that. Uh, so that happens, and then about a month later or so, guess who else's body floats up?
Okay.
Yeah, Harvey, and he was stuck in kind of caught in some craggy stuff, but he's in the river, just upriver a ways from where she was found. But
Okay.
anyway, so now they've pulled him out of the river. He died the exact same way. He also is wrapped in a duvet with copper wire, but the detective that recovered him from the river says that he was tied to a car axle that he had to unhook him from.
Okay.
That somebody had maybe tied an axle to him to,
Try to weight
make him
him
float to
down.
the bottom of the river or something. Yeah. So now they have both bodies and now they're really, trying to figure it out. Now here's some kind of interesting things for Americans because, our laws are quite different. They went to every farm in the area and took samples of all of their copper wire spools and confiscated every 22 in the area that they could get a hold of. Here you would never be able to do that, but they
No.
went to every and took all of these guns, took them back to their lab and did a ton of shooting tests. And they eventually ruled out every single gun but two. And one of the guns belonged to another neighbor, a man named Arthur Allen Thomas. And the other gun belonged to another guy that lived not too far away. And I don't even have his name in front of me actually, but Then they start piecing together some other stuff about Arthur Allen Thomas. Arthur Allen Thomas had a real thing for Jeannette years ago before she got married. And before he had gotten married, he was married as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they started to get suspicious of him because they said that they thought the cartridge could have come from his gun. And he apparently had a thing for her, and some of the other women said, oh yeah, once upon a time he really pestered her, and she kind of had a problem with him. So in the house, when they search it, they find this really fancy like brush and comb and mirror set in a box with a card to Jeannette from him. And he claims that he gave that to her, years ago before she was married when they dated. And her dad actually corroborated that. But basically, that's what they have on that. That's what they have. And so, Mickey Iyer, sorry. The other gun was Mickey Iyer. But Mickey Iyer, they gave him his gun and gave it back. They tested it and gave it back, and they questioned him like once, and that was it. But they've really got their eye on him now. So eventually, they do go ahead and arrest Arthur Allen Thomas.
Okay.
And they eventually convict Arthur Allen Thomas.
Okay.
And then he goes for a couple of appeals. Really, all they have is the gun, the casing that they found, and they found it in the flower bed, looking like perhaps he had shot them through the window while they were eating dinner. So they have the one shell casing that they found in the flower bed that matches his gun, maybe. The axle fits a car that he had new axles put on, and he had these old axles that maybe he had sitting around his property.
Mm-hmm.
But they match up to a car that he has, that he had these axles removed, that perhaps he was putting onto a trailer. So they link him to the axles, they link him to the gun, and then they're really kind of over the moon about this story that, he had been harassing Jeannette at some point. So that's kind of it. So they do convict him on both counts of murder and decide that he's, going down forever, right? And then a couple of years later, he's gone for multiple appeals and he can't seem to get anywhere. Finally, after he's been in prison for 9 years, he is pardoned and released. And there is a discovery that there has been some indiscretions on the part of one of the detectives that set him up.
So who, help me understand, because I only know what pardon means in the US, which means that a governor or the president has to do that. How do you get pardoned in New Zealand?
It was a governor.
It was a governor. Okay.
Yep, it was a governor who eventually, decided that they had the wrong man in prison and let him out. And eventually, then, all of this evidence comes out that he was potentially set up by a police officer who had done some kind of shady things with the guns and the bullet casings. He's the one that pulled Harvey out of the water. And some people feel like that axle was not attached to him, but that he set that up as well.
It is strange that there was an axle attached to Harvey and not one to Jeannette, and everything else was the same. I mean, why? And if you'd replace the axles on your car, you have two. So why would you not then use them both? Like, that does seem weird to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I really don't think he did it. My hit right now is that he didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
He was a little creepy, and there was some kind of stalkery stuff. I mean, I get the energy around it, and I do think that kind of went on after they were married even. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that he would ever have killed her. My sense of him is that he was still madly in love with her, and that although he might have considered harming her husband to get to her, that he would not have hurt her. It's
Mhm.
not that kind of a situation where if I can't have you, no one can. It doesn't feel like that to
Right.
me. Like he had loved her from afar. He
Yep.
wouldn't have harmed her.
Yep. So the governor that pardoned her, or pardoned him, sorry, his name was General Keith Holyoke.
Okay.
So after they discover that there was some, there was maybe a setup here by the police, they don't ever prosecute a police officer over it, but they do give him what would be the equivalent of about $4.5 million in damages
Wow.
because he was, they believed, wrongfully convicted and put in prison for
Mm.
9 years.
My sense is with the officer, he knew that connection. There was a lot of pressure to solve this. This is a small community. These kinds of things don't happen. And so there was a lot of pressure. We got to get this solved. We don't want people feeling unsafe here. And so it was a convenient setup because there was already this connection. I do
Mhm.
feel that it was intentional. I absolutely do feel that when he found that body, that he went, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get the notoriety for this. I'm also going to, get my
Yeah.
boss off my back. I do feel like there was very clear intent there
Mhm.
on the part of the officer to do just that.
Mhm. Agreed. Agreed. And so, yeah, so that's the crux of what happened. Now, Jeanette's friends say that there had been some weird things that had happened on their farm in the months leading up to their murders. They had had 2 fires at their home, as well as had a robbery. And so there had been some stuff, and that she'd gotten nervous and uncomfortable about staying home alone with the baby. And when
Mhm,
he would go out to work, like at other farms or go to a farm sale and things like that, she'd go
mhm.
with him and hang out in the car with the baby because she wasn't feeling good about staying home. So that's a little bit of hearsay, but that's what, had been said by some of her friends and people that knew her. And so, one really sad thing is that because they put the wrong guy in jail, they weren't focusing anywhere else. They really didn't have a lot of other leads, besides that. Though, we do have the other guy with the other gun, but, they
Yeah,
immediately didn't think it was him.
that's a no-go. I think that's entirely a no-go.
Yeah. So the big question, and I know I recognize this is a nutshell of an enormous case. I get it,
Right.
but that's that is the bones of it. So the question of it, okay, a couple other things. I guess I'm going to complicate this a little bit more. Some other people that had driven past had claimed that they had seen a woman outside with a toddler playing in those 3 days.
Hmm.
And so that's one thing that kind of bothered people is that was somebody at the house? Had somebody ever come in and fed the baby or taken care of her at all? Or had she really sat there for all of that time? There's lots of questions like that.
I feel like they were mistaken about that. I really do. I don't feel like that happened at all.
Mhm.
Um, so I feel like that this all comes down to money. I feel like that Harvey borrowed money from somebody. Their farm was struggling. They were having a difficult time. They borrowed some money from some rather shady characters, and then they were having trouble paying it back. And it was I feel like there was a lot of intimidation happening with the fires and the robbery at the house. That it was this escalating, you have to pay us back kind of situation. They were kind of banking on the farm situation happening in order to be able to pay back. The problem being that that didn't actually mean money. It just meant like land.
Yeah.
And I do feel like that ultimately they were killed by 2 people. There were 2 men involved, that they were shot from like outside the house, as the police did to see that, had the evidence for that is exactly what happened. And that the house was robbed. I do feel like there were some things taken that, because the owners of the house were dead, they couldn't identify. Nobody realized were missing. So I do feel like they did rob them and take some more things to try to pay back the money that was owed. But I do feel like this was a kind of a loan shark kind of a situation, and that these two men were representing whoever they owed money to. I don't feel like they were the actual people that owed them money. It was their, their thugs basically. But I do feel it was two men. Um, and I do feel that they were ugly, heartless people who didn't give a damn about the baby. They didn't give a damn about
Mhm.
anything. What they were doing was trying to get whatever they could to try to pay back the loan. I don't feel that they were from this community. I don't feel like they're anybody that people in the neighborhood would have identified or recognized. Um, I do feel that this was related, that they link back to a city. So they link back to a larger, and I don't know anything about New Zealand as far as, the geography, but I do feel that there was a larger city. That's where they had come from. That's where they went back to. The guns that they reviewed, none of them were the guns that killed them, and that they just really didn't leave anything behind. It was a very professional job. The reason they put them in the river there is because they didn't want to link them back at all to where they came from originally.
Mhm.
I do feel like that these are two men who have committed other murders in the, it's kind of a mob sort of thing. I don't know what you would call it in New Zealand, but that's what it feels to me like, is it's organized
Mhm.
crime. There was some kind of a loan situation that they were really struggling to pay back, and that this was ultimately the final straw. That's how they paid with their lives. I do feel that they had some things in the house that were worth some money that were taken,
Mhm.
that were, at least in part paid the loan back, but I feel like they let it go way too long, and so it went from being just, you owe us money, to it was there was a lot of vindictive energy around it.
Mhm.
The hard part is that nobody knew this. I don't feel like anybody
Mhm.
outside of these two people had any idea that they'd done this, that they hadn't told anyone. They knew her dad would not approve and would be angry about it. They didn't tell him. They didn't
Mhm.
tell anybody.
They were pretty private. They were known to be pretty private people.
Now, living where they did, they were facing a lot of judgment from other people for something like this.
Yeah.
And so they just weren't gonna tell anybody, and I don't feel that they had any idea that this would result in their deaths. I mean, I just don't feel like, I feel like they thought they're gonna be able to pay it back, it's gonna be okay, they're gonna figure it out, and they really got in over their heads. They didn't realize what kind of a situation that they were in.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Do you think that they thought they would have a little bit more money, that when that estate closed,
Yeah,
that
I
they were
do.
gonna have cash, and so then
Mhm.
they came hunting for their cash, but they didn't actually have cash?
I feel like they were banking on that, and then it didn't come back the way that they expected it to come back, and they
Mhm.
just didn't have it. They didn't have enough to give
Yeah.
it, to pay it, and at this point, they'd been warned over and over again, and there'd been threats, and they knew. I feel like they both very much knew that they had been threatened, and that they knew exactly what the robbery was, what the fires were. She knew why she wasn't staying at home. She knew why. She
Mhm.
knew exactly why.
Yeah.
But they just didn't dare tell anybody because they didn't want anybody to judge them.
Mhm.
And also, I feel like that what they'd done was illegal, that the whatever kind of loan this was not legal, and that they were very much afraid for their safety at this point, so they just did not tell anybody, and they thought that they could solve it, but
Mhm.
they couldn't.
Yeah. Okay. So, there it is. I mean, that's the case. That's a hell of a deal.
It is, it's really sad, especially sad for that community because it made everybody question each other,
Yeah.
and I'm sure affected their sense of safety in a small community like that, that somebody could come in and do that kind of a thing. But ultimately, it definitely, not that they deserved what they got in any way, they didn't, but it ultimately did come back right to their own choices and some things that they were keeping quiet about.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Uh, an interesting side note on Arthur Allen Thomas, he and I have to back up on his convictions. He was convicted and acquitted twice.
Wow.
Yeah,
They were just so sure.
they were just so sure. But later on in life, he was charged with some rapes, with some sexual assault, that were historic. And so that's how they've called them. They're historic. And
Uh-huh.
so they happened a long time ago.
Wow.
And has been, in court as of just, here in the last couple of years over that.
I don't find that surprising. I really don't. I just, I don't think in any way would he have ever harmed Jeannette. He was very much in love with her from afar. He would not have killed her.
Yeah. But yes, so and on these cases, the way New Zealand handles them is they don't release the names of the victims.
Mhm.
And so or the accusers at this point. And so it seems that we don't really know who it is that's saying that he assaulted them a long time ago, but he's still facing some charges.
Mhm. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting because, I just feel like he was an easy mark for an officer that really wanted to solve a case
Yeah.
in that
Well,
situation.
and it's a small community. I mean, maybe he was a bit of a pervert, and maybe this cop knew that, or was kind of a guy that this cop knew some stuff about him,
Well,
and
and I
so
think that after
he
Jeanette's
felt
body was found,
bias.
that came out about him and his history there, and I feel like then it was just sort of easy to turn to him because
Mhm.
that would make sense,
Mhm. I think so too.
and it would get the case solved, and I feel like there was so much pressure to solve the case and
Yeah.
make the community feel safe again.
Well, yeah, because
We'll take
everyone
whatever
was
we can get.
feeling unsafe. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it shook this whole community to its core, and so
yeah,
anyway, it's a remarkably sad case. To this day, their daughter, Rochelle has continued to push for a better investigation. She has really been outspoken in her frustration and anger with the police that handled it, that they
yeah.
did such a poor job and that there were a lot of missteps and things that didn't get done or got done in, poorly. And
Right.
so she's
Well,
still,
and this was in the '70s. I mean, that was just the very beginning, really, of, forensics. I
yeah,
mean, I'm sure it was just really basic stuff that they had to begin with.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
And my sense is that this was committed by professionals, that these 2 men were pros, they knew exactly what they were doing, and they just didn't leave anything behind.
Yep.
And because they had never talked about the loan and they'd never told anybody the truth about why they were being hassled, nobody had any idea who these people could possibly be.
Hmm.
And they didn't leave anything behind forensically. They knew.
The big city is probably Auckland.
Okay.
Auckland is the biggest, like city close to that area geographically, I believe. If I'm wrong, please let me know.
Okay.
'Cause I know our Kiwi friends are watching this going, you girls.
I know we do actually have a lot of followers in Australia and New Zealand, which we really
Uh-huh.
appreciate. So I'm glad we're
Right.
doing this.
Awesome.
Somebody in our YouTube channel asked us recently if we do international cases, and we've done many
Yeah.
and
Oh,
will continue
definitely.
to.
Yeah,
Very interesting. But
absolutely.
yeah, I do feel like if they were to look back into organized crime in that city
Mhm.
at that time, that they might be able to find something there. But I just do not feel like there's anything evidence-wise that will link anybody back to these people. Just the way that it happened, nobody
There's just
knew.
not. Yeah. Well, there's just not much evidence.
There isn't.
No. Well, thanks for reading that. That is quite the
Yeah,
case. It's
it
quite
is.
the quite the journey from
Oh my
being
god.
convicted and acquitted and convicted and finally stayed. And he's had quite the journey in his lifetime over this case. But after watching it that happened in our community, with the Brian Drip case that we talked about earlier, seeing people
Yeah,
being convicted of crimes and going to prison for, long periods of time or maybe their whole lives. That's a
yeah.
scary thought.
It is, it is. Christopher Tapp did 20 years
Yeah.
for Andy Dodge's murder, and he did not do it. He
Mm.
confessed and, ultimately was released early and then eventually exonerated for, a coerced confession,
Mhm.
but it took 20 years.
Yeah, but to exonerate him, they made him sign something saying that he wouldn't sue the city or the
Yeah.
state.
it's been pretty bad, honestly. He's been treated
It's
really crappy.
been terrible. Yeah.
Yep.
So anyway, that is the case. So
Wow.
we will be back in a few days with a live to update you on whatever's new. I know there's a little bit of new stuff in the Lori Vallow case, and who knows? There's just a lot of movement overall right now. So,
Yeah.
and if you guys have a case you'd like to see us cover, always leave a comment. We appreciate it. You know that, oh, excuse me. You know that we do have this is a podcast. It's also a video cast. So if you're listening to it as a podcast, we appreciate you. If you're watching the video, we appreciate you as well. If you're watching the video, please like, comment, share if you're drawn. Those things help
Subscribe,
a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, whatever you want to do. And of course, we have a Patreon to help support our efforts to continue to do this work. And that is True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters on Patreon. We've picked up quite a few patrons, and we appreciate you guys as well. So
definitely.
that's what we've got.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care. Have a wonderful, wonderful week or day or night, wherever you are.
Yeah.
And we'll be back soon. You've been listening to True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters.